Montana Territory, June 1873. The storm had blown through by morning, but the wagon tracks were still half sunk in the soaked earth, leading nowhere good. Elijah Ames rode slow, reins slack in his left hand, rifle across his saddle. He had spotted smoke across the ridge too small for a camp, too messy for a chimney. Something had burned. When he crested the hill, his jaw went tight. A wagon lay tipped on its side, wool splintered, canvas torn and blackened. Supplies were scattered and the grass flower trampled into mud, a doll's arm sticking out of a broken chest. And a woman stood near the wreck, skirts soaked to the knees, arms wrapped tight around two children. Elijah dismounted without a word. The woman turned, eyes wide and wild, but she did not run. She just pulled the boy and girl in closer. Both children looked under 10, the girl clutching her mother's dress, the boy's lip bleeding. "I am not here to harm you," Elijah said, keeping his voice low. "Name's Elijah Ames. I saw the smoke." She did not answer at first. Her face was pale, lips cracked, but she stood straight. "They took everything," she said. "Left us here to die." Elijah looked around. No bodies, no blood, just the wreckage and wind. "Who did?" "I do not know. They wore bandanas. 3 of them. One had a rifle." Her voice shook now. "They came last night, took the horses, the food, my husband's boots." "Your husband?" Elijah asked. She hesitated. "Dead. Months ago. Snakebite, near Rock Creek." He looked at the children. The girl had tears on her cheeks but was silent. The boy stared back at him, stubborn and angry. "What is your name?" Elijah asked gently. "Orietta Taves. This is my son, Paxton." "That's my daughter, Phoebe." Elijah nodded. "You have anyone expecting you?" "No," her voice cracked. "We were headed to Fort Benton. My aunt had land there, but she passed last winter. I thought maybe I could find work, or something. I did not know what else to do." Elijah stepped closer. "You are not going to die out here." She blinked like she had not heard right. "I have a cabin 5 miles west, river-fed. It is not much, but it is safe. I will take you there. I cannot pay you. I did not ask for payment." Orietta looked down at her children. Phoebe was shivering, barefoot. Paxton's small fist clutched a rock like it might protect them. "Please," Elijah said, voice low. "Let me help." She nodded once, slow. "Help us get the trunk. All we have is in there." Together they lifted the heavy trunk onto Elijah's horse. Then he lifted Phoebe up, wrapped her in his coat. Orietta rode with the girl in her arms. Elijah carried Paxton in front of him, the boy stiff and silent. The trail to Elijah's land was narrow and rough, but the trees gave them cover. Orietta said nothing, but Elijah felt her gaze on him more than once, wary and tired. His cabin sat low in a meadow near the riverbank. There was smoke in the chimney, a shovel leaning against the porch, chickens clucking in the coop. He had built it with his own hands 4 years back. It was not much, but it was clean and dry. He had never brought anyone here before. Orietta helped lay Phoebe on the cot by the fire. The girl was already asleep. Elijah handed Paxton dry clothes, showed him where the water barrel was. The boy never thanked him, but he followed orders. Orietta stood near the hearth, hands clasped, hair falling loose around her face. She was younger than Elijah had first guessed, maybe 26, but her eyes looked older, worn out from watching too much fall apart. Elijah poured hot water into a tin cup, added a pinch of tea leaves. "Sit," he said. "Drink this. You look ready to fall over." She did not argue. As she sat, she pulled her hands into her lap, twisting her fingers together. "I owe you more than I can say," she whispered. "You do not owe me anything." Her eyes lifted. "Why are you helping us?" Elijah looked at her for a long breath. Because I know what it is to be left with nothing. Orietta looked away, and for a moment, the room was quiet except for the fire. That night, Elijah gave them the bed. He slept on the floor with a blanket and his rifle nearby. In the dark, he listened to Phoebe's soft breathing, Paxton's restless turning, and Orietta's quiet sobs she tried to hide in the pillow. He did not sleep much. The next day, he rode out early, left them with some dried venison and bread. On his way back from town, he brought flour, canned peaches, a pair of boots for Paxton, and a hairbrush for Orietta. She blinked when she saw it. I remembered you said they took your husband's boots, Elijah said, setting the bag down. Figured Paxton could use a pair that fit. Orietta held the brush in her hands like it was something breakable. Her voice was soft. Thank you. Over the next week, Elijah fixed the barn roof while Paxton helped him feed the chickens. Phoebe spent her days chasing butterflies and watching the river. Orietta washed clothes, baked bread, and tried not to cry when she thought no one was watching. Elijah saw her shoulders shake once, behind the cabin. He did not say anything. He just left a folded blanket over the porch rail that night. She found it, used it. One afternoon, while fixing the fence line, Elijah heard footsteps. Orietta stood there, sleeves rolled up, a basket of apples in her hands. You have done more than anyone ever has, she said. I do not know why you keep doing it. Elijah wiped his forehead, leaned on the post. Because you and those children deserve better than what you got. I have lost too much, she whispered. My husband, my home, my family. I am tired of losing. Then let me be the one you keep, Elijah said, voice steady. Orietta stared at him, lips parted, breath caught. I am not asking for anything right now, Elijah added. Just let me stay beside you. Let me be someone who does not leave. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not look away. Instead, she came closer, slow, and reached up to touch his cheek. I do not know how to start again, she said. We do it together, he told her. One day at a time. And for the first time since he found her, she smiled. Not wide, not bright, but real. Behind her, Paxton was watching from the porch. His arms were crossed, but his eyes were softer now. Phoebe sat nearby, braiding wildflowers into her hair, humming to herself. Orietta turned and looked at them, then back at Elijah. All right, she said. One day at a time. The oat crop hadn't taken well that spring, but the soil along the river grew beans strong and steady. So Elijah turned the ground by hand while Paxton hauled buckets from the bank. In the late morning heat, Orietta stood on the edge of the garden with a wide-brimmed hat shading her face, watching quietly as they worked. Your boys got good sense, Elijah said, pausing to shift the spade. Knows when to ask and when to just do. Orietta handed him a cloth to wipe his brow. He's had to learn fast. Too fast. Elijah straightened. He's got your steadiness. That's no small thing. She didn't answer right away, just traced the rim of the empty pail with her thumb. He started sleeping through the night again, she said after a time. First time in months. The wind rustled the cottonwoods, and Phoebe's giggle carried faint from where she played beneath them, stringing small stones together with a bit of twine. Orietta looked toward the sound, then back at Elijah. You built something safe here. It's not just the walls. He leaned on the spade, watching her, not speaking over the weight of her words. After supper, while the children gathered kindling, Orietta joined Elijah beside the corral. The horses were restless, ears twitching, noses lifting toward the mountains. There's weather coming, she said. From the west, Elijah agreed. Might bring snow to the high pass, even in June. Orietta rested her arms on the rail. We won't make it to Fort Benton now. I thought we might still try before the summer's end. But I see now. See what? She turned her head slowly toward him. That I don't want to go. Elijah didn't move, just waited. I kept thinking this was temporary, that we were just passing through your kindness, she said. But the children, they've stopped asking when we'll leave. And I've stopped planning it. He took a breath, slow. You don't owe me any decision now. You stay as long as you want. I want to stay, she said plain. I just don't know how to let myself have something again. Elijah's voice was gentle. You already have. You just haven't said it out loud. That night, after the children were asleep, Orietta came out to the porch where Elijah was oiling the hinges of the door. She leaned against the frame, arms folded. I used to sing, before everything turned, she said. Not for crowds, just around the house. My husband didn't have much use for it. Said it made him feel like I was hiding something. Elijah set the rag aside. Do you miss it? I miss who I was when I did it. He stood, brushing sawdust from his trousers. Then maybe you ought to sing again. Not for anyone else. Just for yourself. Orietta looked at him, quiet. I know what it is, he added. To tuck pieces of yourself away, but they don't stay gone. They wait. What did you stop doing? He looked out over the dark fields. Drawing. I used to sketch the land when I rode cattle routes. Thought maybe I'd make maps someday. Never did. Why not? He met her eyes. Because I never stayed anywhere long enough to finish one. She stepped closer. And now, I could start again. Orietta reached out and took his hand, not shy, not hesitant, just sure. You teach me to draw, she said, and I'll teach you the old hymns. He held her gaze. Deal. In the days that followed, Elijah pulled a flat box from the back of the cupboard, lifted out a charcoal pencil worn to half length, and showed Orietta how to shape a ridgeline with just a shade. She sang while she worked, quiet at first, then stronger, and the sound of her voice filled the corners of the cabin until it no longer felt like a place where sorrow lived. One evening, while Phoebe and Paxton lay on a blanket under the stars, whispering about constellations, Elijah handed Orietta a folded paper. She opened it slowly. Inside was a sketch of the cabin, the river, and 3 figures: a woman, a boy, and a girl standing beneath the cottonwoods. Orietta's hand trembled slightly as she traced the lines. You drew us. He nodded. She looked up at him, and her eyes held something new, not grief, not fear, but a kind of wonder touched with peace. I thought I'd forgotten what it felt like, she whispered. To be seen. You haven't, he said. You just needed someone to look long enough. Orietta leaned forward and kissed him soft, certain, trusting. When she pulled back, her forehead rested against his. I'm not afraid anymore, she said. Good, Elijah murmured, because I'm not going anywhere. And beneath the vast Montana sky, they stood together as the wind moved through the grass. No longer strangers to hope. By early July, the work changed. The garden needed weeding every day, and the hens had taken to wandering farther toward the edge of the tree line, scratching under the wild plum bushes. Orietta started rising before the sun to knead dough by lantern light, her hands steady even when her thoughts weren't. She didn't speak much in the mornings, but Elijah learned to read the way she carried herself, how she stood a little closer to the children now, how her shoulders stayed more relaxed when he was nearby. That week, he built a new shelf near the hearth for her hymnals and the sketchbook they shared. He sanded it smooth and left it unvarnished, just the scent of pine lingering in the wood. She noticed it mid-afternoon, while Phoebe napped and Paxton was off down by the river with a slingshot Elijah had helped him carve. You made this for me, Orietta said, brushing her fingertips along the edge. For us, Elijah said. I figured it was time some things had a place. Orietta set the hymnals down with care, then looked toward the window where light filtered through the muslin curtain. It's strange how a wall can feel familiar. I used to think I'd never feel that again. Elijah reached for the kettle and poured water into the tin basin, the steam catching in the slant of light. Walls don't make a home. You do that yourself over time. She turned toward him. How long did you live alone like this? For winters, he said, dipping the cloth. First one was the hardest. After that, I stopped expecting company. Orietta sat down at the table. Did you ever think about marrying? He paused, wringing out the cloth slowly. I did. Once. Long time back. She was the daughter of a cattle broker in Missouri. Her family didn't think much of a trail hand with calloused hands and no name to lean on. You never tried again? I didn't want something that needed proving. I wanted something that stayed when the hard seasons came. Orietta folded her hands on the table. And if someone stayed through all the hard seasons already, then she's already what a man should be praying for, Elijah said quietly. Outside, the wind picked up. A dry rustle moved through the cottonwoods, and a hawk circled above the ridge. Orietta stood and crossed to the window, watching the branches sway. There's a letter I haven't opened, she said after a moment. It came with the trunk. My husband's brother sent it after the funeral. I haven't touched it since. Elijah didn't push. He just waited. I thought maybe if I read it, I'd have to feel it all again, she said. But I keep thinking, maybe I'm strong enough now. If you want me nearby when you do, Elijah said, I'll sit with you. Orietta gave a single nod, then walked to the chest at the foot of the bed. She lifted the lid slowly, pulled out a folded envelope stained at the corners. She held it tight for a moment, then brought it to the table. Elijah sat across from her, silent. The paper crackled as she opened it. Her eyes moved over the words, her mouth set in a thin line. When she finished, she held the page in her lap, not looking up. He said I should send the children east. That I'm not fit to raise them alone, she said. He offered to take Phoebe, said I could keep Paxton for now until he's older. Elijah's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. I used to think maybe he was right, Orietta said, that I wasn't enough on my own. But now she looked up, eyes fierce and steady. I know I am. Elijah reached across the table, resting his hand over hers. You've done more than enough, and you're not alone. The next morning, she burned the letter in the stove. Later that week, Elijah found Paxton behind the barn, trying to polish a rock with a scrap of flannel. The boy looked up, not startled, just thoughtful. Found this by the river, Paxton said. It's not gold, but it's smooth. Elijah crouched beside him. You planning to keep it? Paxton nodded. Don't want to lose it. That's reason enough, Elijah said. Some things don't have to be worth something to everyone, just to you. Paxton turned the stone in his hand. Are we staying here? He asked. Elijah looked at him. Do you want to? The boy hesitated. I think Ma sleeps easier now. That matters. Paxton tucked the stone into his pocket and stood. I'll help with the fence post today. You said it leaned too far. Elijah nodded. I'd be glad for it. That evening, as the sun slid behind the ridge and the sky turned the color of ripe plums, Orietta stood in the doorway holding a chipped mug. Her hair was braided down her back, and her apron still had flour dust in the folds. I've been thinking, she said as Elijah joined her on the porch, about making a school day for Phoebe and Paxton, just 2 days a week to start. I've still got the primer my mama taught me from. You'd be good at that, Elijah said. They listen to you. I want them to know more than just how to survive. They will, he said. With you teaching them, they'll know how to live. She leaned her shoulder against his. I used to be afraid I'd never be more than what I'd lost. Elijah's voice was quiet. You were always more. You just had to find a place where it could grow again. Orietta turned her face toward him. I'm not scared of staying anymore. And I'm not scared of loving you, Elijah said. She pressed her palm to his chest, just above his heart. Then let's not wait on any more seasons to pass. He kissed her there on the porch, with the fields behind them and the cabin warm at their backs. And when the stars came out, they stayed a long while in the silence, not needing anything but the nearness of what they'd found. The storm that had started it all was long gone now. And what stood in its place was a life built slow and true, with hands that healed and hearts that chose to stay. Orietta stood barefoot in the creek, skirts gathered in one hand, eyes fixed on the water curling around her ankles. The sun hung low behind the pines, and the light spilled across the surface in long, trembling lines. Behind her, the cabin door creaked open. You always this quiet when you're thinking hard? Elijah asked from the bank. She didn't turn. Only when I'm trying to remember how I used to feel before everything changed. Elijah stepped down the slope, his boots crunching against the gravel. He didn't speak again until he was beside her, hands in his pockets, hat tipped back. You want to feel like her again? He asked. Orietta shook her head. No, I want to feel like someone new who's not just made of what got taken. The creek moved on, steady and indifferent. A bird called from deeper in the trees, and somewhere farther off, Phoebe's voice rose in a song she was making up as she went. You ever think about what you want now? Elijah asked. Not what you've lost, not what you've had to do, just what you want for yourself. She bent to pick up a smooth bit of driftwood, turned it over in her hand. I want to plant plum trees. Elijah blinked. Plum trees. I saw a few saplings near the ridge, wild ones. We could dig them up, set them near the cabin. She looked over at him. Something that takes time, something that grows slow and sweet. I can help you dig, he said. Orietta smiled faintly, then waded back to shore, brushing water from her calves. And I want a rocking chair on the porch, one with arms wide enough to hold a child when they fall asleep in your lap. We'll make one, Elijah said. I've got cedar boards in the shed. That night, after Phoebe and Paxton had gone quiet in their beds, Elijah set 3 candles on the table and brought out the ledger he used in town when he traded. He slid it across to Orietta. I've been thinking, he said. We could register this land in both our names. It'd take a trip into Helena, and some papers drawn up, but it can be done. She stared down at the worn leather cover. You'd do that. I already see it as yours, he said. Just want to make it right on paper. Orietta reached across, covered his hand with hers. I want to marry you, she said softly. Not someday, not after more waiting. I want to start that life now. Elijah didn't answer right away. He just turned his hand over, laced his fingers through hers. There's a church near the edge of the valley, he said. White paint, kind of peeling. Preacher's old but kind. I've traded eggs for his sermons once or twice. Orietta's eyes filled, not with sorrow, but something steadier. Will you take me there? Elijah nodded. We'll ride out at first light. Paxton and Phoebe can stand with us. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with a breath. I never thought I'd feel this again. Not just safe, but chosen. You are, he said. Every day, every way that matters. Before dawn, they packed biscuits, a jar of apple preserves, and the dress Orietta had mended from her trunk. Elijah brushed the dust from his coat and cleaned his boots with river water. Paxton helped Phoebe braid her hair with a bit of twine and wild mint. The ride to the church took most of the morning. The sky was clear, the trail quiet. When they arrived, the preacher stood alone, leaning on a cane, but he smiled wide when he saw them. I don't need a crowd to make a promise, Orietta said, stepping down from the saddle. Neither do I, Elijah said. They stood before the wooden steps with the children on either side, and the preacher spoke plain and warm, asking no questions they didn't already carry in their hearts. When it came time, Elijah held Orietta's hands and said, I choose you, and I'll keep choosing you. Orietta looked up at him and said, I'm not lost anymore. I'm home. Phoebe clapped once, then shyly tucked her hands behind her back. Paxton stood taller than he ever had, his chin slightly lifted. The preacher blessed them, and Orietta kissed Elijah with both hands on his face, the wind lifting her veil of loose hair behind her. They rode back slow, stopping beneath the ridge to mark the spots for the plum trees. Elijah carved their initials into the cedar fence post before they went inside, the knife strokes careful and deep. That night, Orietta curled in Elijah's arms by the hearth, her forehead resting against his chest. The fire cracked low, and the stew pot simmered on the hook. I want to grow old here, she whispered, with lines on my face from laughter, not grief. Elijah kissed the top of her head. Then we'll fill this place with years that matter. Outside, the wind moved through the grass, soft and sure. Inside, the quiet held not emptiness, but peace. A life that had once been broken now stood whole, a little bruised, a little weathered, but solid as the land beneath their feet. And it was theirs, every inch of it. Orietta crouched near the base of the ridge, brushing soil away from the roots of the young plum sapling Elijah had unearthed earlier that morning. Her knees ached from the crouch, but she didn't mind. The late summer earth was rich and damp, and as she pressed it back around the roots with her bare hands, she felt the weight of the day settle into her in a way that felt right. Elijah knelt across from her, his hands calloused and sure, tamping the dirt down firm around the second tree. He didn't speak until both saplings were upright and steady. We'll need to stake them, he said, reaching for the bundle of thin cedar rods he'd carved the week before. Orietta nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. I'll cut some twine before nightfall. The light was shifting gold through the trees, and the long hush of late afternoon had settled over the land. Phoebe's laughter rang faintly near the cabin where she and Paxton were stringing berries for drying. Elijah stood, brushing the soil from his trousers. You know, Orietta said, straightening slowly, I used to think of land as something you passed over, something that never stayed with you. Elijah stepped beside her, resting his hand at her back. And now, she looked toward the saplings. Now it feels like it's holding us. They walked back to the cabin with the hush of tired, satisfied work between them. Inside, the table bore the scent of cooling fried cornmeal cakes. Paxton had taken to flipping them carefully on the skillet, and today's batch was round and even. Phoebe had arranged a circle of small stones on the windowsill, each painted with a flower or tree she'd seen that week. After supper, Elijah set a small oil lamp on the porch railing and pulled out the folded sheet of paper he'd been working on since the wedding. Orietta sat beside him, her feet tucked under her, a mending basket in her lap. I want to show you something, he said, unfolding the page. She leaned in. It was a drawing, finer than the ones from spring, more careful, more whole. It showed the cabin in fall, imagined with leaves turning, the plum trees taller, the children older by a year or two. Elijah had drawn himself and Orietta standing near the fence, her hand in his. I was thinking, he said, about what comes next, not in the far-off kind of way, just in the way where you start to plan for more. Orietta touched the edge of the page. You want more? He turned toward her, voice low. Only if you do. She set the mending aside. I'd like to build onto the west side before winter. A room for the children that's truly theirs. I'll start cutting the boards tomorrow. She smiled, then looked toward the barn. We'll need another milk cow come spring. Phoebe's been asking about making butter the way my mother used to. We'll ride to the valley market when the snow melts. Orietta leaned her head against his shoulder. I want a life with nothing hurried in it. Just seasons like this, growing into each other. Elijah kissed the top of her hair. Then that's what we'll make. That night, as they lay in bed with the window cracked and the wind rustling the tall grass, Orietta whispered, You ever miss the road? No, Elijah said. I used to think I was meant to keep moving. Turns out I was just waiting to find the place that would hold me still. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together under the quilt. I'm glad it was here. In the months that followed, Elijah built the children's room with cedar boards hauled down from the ridge. Orietta sewed curtains from flour sacks and taught Phoebe how to stitch straight lines. Paxton learned to whittle, carving animals for the windowsill, and once, a small bird Orietta placed beside the lamp with quiet pride. They bought the milk cow in April, and Elijah showed Phoebe how to handle her gently. Speaking in low tones, she mimicked with earnest care. The plum trees took to the soil, their branches budding by the second summer. Elijah strung a rope swing between them for the children, and Orietta hung a small bell on the porch to call them in from the fields. Orietta taught the school days twice a week, just as she'd planned. Elijah built benches from leftover boards, and Paxton insisted on carrying them in each morning before lessons. When the first snow came, the children stayed close to the hearth, and Orietta read aloud from the primer, her voice steady and warm. They never spoke of leaving again. One early evening, 2 years from the day Elijah first found them near the wrecked wagon, Orietta stood in the doorway and watched him walk up from the field, his shirt damp with sweat, a bundle of wild onions in his hand. He saw her watching, and his face lit with quiet joy. She stepped down to meet him halfway. You're late, she said, though there was no edge to it. Got caught watching the sky, he said. It's turning the color of the old quilts. She took the onions from his hand. Supper's already on. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. I'll never get tired of coming home to you. Good, she whispered, because I'll never stop waiting at the door. They kissed there in the tall grass, the wind moving soft through the trees, the sky deepening above them. And as the day faded into dusk, the light lingered on the porch where 2 sets of boots rested side by side, and the sound of laughter rose from inside a house that had once been quiet. It stayed full from that day on.